thank you for everybody for coming. I think it was a good move to put me as the last speaker because if you give me free time, I'll not shut up. So this is a good way of doing this. Um, Thank you, Professor Kancha, for inviting me to review your book and to be part of this event. I think you've told the story before. Like many of us, our consciousness comes from his books. So Why I'm Not a Hindu was a very pivotal book for my journey also. So the book that Manikanta was showing, the last book, Shudra, A Vision, if I remember the title correctly, I wrote a review which has since been described as nasty. That was not my intention, but it was a harsh critique. And one of in my 10 years of academic experience, this is a very standout moment for me because Sir reached out and actually kind of congratulated me for the review. And when this new book came out, he reached out, he said, you have to do it. And he told me very clearly, be critical. In my 10 years of dealing with Brahminical academia, I've never found this. So in that sense, I really admire that, and I wish more academia was like that. So thank you for thinking of me, Southside Books, for organizing this event, everybody who came out on a weekday. And I apologize, I don't speak Telugu, I'm a stupid North Indian, so you'll have to deal with English. Very quickly, I will just try to kind of wrap up some of these ideas that I have about the book. I think Manikanta and Professor Soumya have done a very good job of laying out some of the big ideas. When a book comes, I think there are many ways we can think about it. One is what the content is saying, and one is what it represents. Since the content has been very well kind of summed up, I would like to talk a little bit about what it represents. So a little bit of a celebration and as requested, a little kind of my contention with it also, both in this together. The first thing that, of course, the thing that strikes, and this is not a casual comment, the language of the book is very easy to read. The tone is very direct, like most of Professor Kancha's writing. This is very important because many of us, now I might speak very smooth English, I wasn't like this. So it's very important for the audience of the book, for a lot of us, the language of it, the tonality of it, it's very direct, and the scope of it is very important. So in that sense, the book already succeeds right at the beginning. Unlike both of Professor Soumya and Manikanta, I did not check the dictionary for the word rebellion. I was just excited by it. I've decided to suitably look military in my appearance also today because I was very excited. I loved the title immediately, Shudra Rebellion. Because why not? About damn time. That was my immediate reaction, and that's what I really want to start by talking about what it represents. I think the book is a very audacious attempt to kind of give a material historical claim to history. I think one of the things that I think Baba Sahib has also described as the broken people of history. Like my own family village in Punjab, what is now Punjab, we trace our history back only about 5 generations. We don't know where we came before that and before that and before that. Most of my Brahmin colleagues know 800 years ago they left Kashmir. So we don't have a claim on history. How do you fight somebody when their entire idea of civilizational superiority is, oh, we come from the Rig Veda. Can you read the Rig Veda? That's not important, but Rig Veda was there. So in that same sense, I do understand your point about why is Harappa civilization so important? Is it because it is grand? Maybe Sir can respond to it, but for me as a reader, it was like, yeah, it gives me a claim to Harappa. It gives me a claim to 5,000 years of history. It gives me a claim to the idea that this is mine, and we've been broken. So I think in that claim itself, it's a very powerful claim. I think also the idea of agriculturism as a philosophy, as a material production as a philosophy, I think it's very, very overlooked in Indian academia because, of course, it would. because Indian academia is very Brahminical. They don't produce things at all, as Sir has said many times over. I like saying this very often also, that Brahmanism has never been a knowledge producing culture. It's a knowledge performing culture. It's a knowledge validating culture. They come and they say this is good scholarship and this is bad scholarship. So in that sense, like, it is very important, I guess, this idea to create something of a philosophy which is coming from a material kind of a thing. As somebody who looks at a lot of Chinese TikTok and Chinese reels, it's something where, and even for the brief time TikTok was allowed in India, you saw this surge of creativity of marginalized people, of Bahujans, of Shudras, of Dalits coming and, just creating these very interesting kind of working prototype videos, and farmer videos were going viral, all kinds of things. So there is a very latent organic appeal for it, which has not yet been intellectualized. So I think in that sense, this is a very, very interesting move. Also, this emphasis of the word Shudra, I think, is very, very important. If you are categorized as OBC, it's very difficult to locate yourself within the caste movement, because Bahujan is a political concept, right? And there is the need for that marker. I get very irritated. Like, I see mostly Savarnas use, the word DBA, DBA. Like, first time I'm publicly talking about it. I know many of our own people also use it, but it's clearly telling you D stands for something we understand, A stands for something we understand, but the B is like this occupying space. Bahujan, otherwise, actually it's an oxymoron, because Bahujan would include Dalit and Adivasi. So you are saying you need a third term, but we don't have it. And you see in the political experiment also in the Lok Sabha, the Samajwadi Party comes out and starts saying PDA, Pichla Dalit Adivasi. So this experimentation, this grasping for a word is there, whether it is Pichla or Bahujan and everything. And I think Sir's attempt to kind of, Professor Kancha's attempt to kind of locate that word in the word Shudra, I think is a very powerful word. I think the book also is very good at theorizing about the Brahmin colonizing of the Shudra mind and agency. I think in the scope of it, it begins and talks about Manu and Kautilya, and it goes all the way to Ram Madhav and Shashi Tharoor, and I quite enjoyed like the commentary on Rahul Gandhi also. So in that sense, the scale of it and the scope of it range is quite good, and it's very modern, because some of these critiques are just buried on Twitter. So you have to be on Twitter, and Twitter doesn't have a citable value. So in to raise the point that Manikanta was also saying, like, the book is not referenced. So how do you deal with it? No, the book is the reference, because the otherwise this argument is in Twitter somewhere. And based on that, like, I would also like very quickly want to move on to, since we are theorizing about how Brahmin colonizing of Shudra agency has been in place, it's also important, like, another topic where Professor Kancha writes very well and has always done so, is on the role of the English language, English medium language. I myself, my own life, I have traced this very clearly. For me, it's a distinction. I'm the only one in my family who speaks good English. And it came not because I was particularly talented, it was from a desire to really kind of get into circles which otherwise I would not get. So, and I grew up in the state of Bengal, and Bengal had this strange language politics where Bangla language is very kind of, sort of pushed. But like the Bangla language, people who are studying in Bangla medium can't get jobs. Jobs are going to the people who are studying in convent schools. Even today, the best schools in Calcutta are the St. Xavier's and La Martiniere and all. So in that sense, so for me, I understood that politics much before I found the language, or I found, Professor Kancha's words. So for me, it's always very powerful. A lot of my own work speaks to this performance of knowledge and language at the intersection of it. Not to romanticize the power of English, but there is a power of English. And very quickly from this point, I will also start pivoting into my little bit of contentions with the project, with this book. As much as I like the title and the book and the scope of it, And the fact that it does also address some of my own past critiques. He has written very nuanced in nuanced ways. Like he will also mention about Shudra atrocities on scheduled caste. He has mentioned of it many times. He has also talked about the intellectual leadership of the SC cohort in the thing and the Shudra failure on that. So he has kind of touched on that. But one of my big contentions is, and the clue is in the chapter he's talking about English as an education, where he kind of points out that, you know, the feudal landlords, the agrarian feudal landlords, did not want to study English because English is suspicious for them, because when you introduce English into the household, then my kids might not want to stay in the village and they can't look over the estate. So in that sense, that's a very powerful insight actually. It also kind of points out at the political imagination of the Shudra, which has never been very national. It has always been very regional and very local and very estate driven. So always content to be the Chote Raja, you know, when the Mughal is also there, you're the Raja of your region and then there is the overlord. In many which ways, post-colonial India has been a neat replication of those power relations, which brings me to my main contentious issue as a Shudra intellectual myself and as many of us is, throughout the book, many times, Professor Kancha has used language like, Shudras have fallen for the trap, could not understand, forced by Brahmins to be like this. A lot of this discourse infantilizes Shudra agency. So we are basically framed as historically stupid children. कि हमको समझा ही नहीं, we didn't understand only, this happened. No, I think some of it also has to come from the idea that we are willing historical participants in some of these processes which have landed us there. I think a little bit of reflection on that also, along with rightly putting the critique on the Brahmin colonizing agency, I think that is something which is, and I would understand why editorially someone might not want to focus on that, but it is a very important element of this body of knowledge or ideological project that we are trying to kind of create. Like caste is also a history of violence. It is a history of violence which Shudras have also not just been recipients of, but also participated in, right? In this thing. And in that acknowledgement, there has to be kind of a review of it, which is why, like, you know, Professor Kancha has kind of like really framed the Punjab protest very as pivotal. As somebody from Punjab, like I have a very different understanding of that protest, and I've never seen it as very pivotal in that sense. It is an agrarian project, but it is not like at least the way I see it, right? Because it kind of, to frame it like that, invisibilizes what the landed gentry in Punjab, Haryana and Western UP, the violence of it within their own communities, within women of their own communities, within the scheduled castes, within minorities, like there is a lot of violence in that project. I think there is also a thing to be understood that in graded violence, when you are the perpetrator of the violence, the system is also rewarding you. We are not, as Shudras, not just, you know, lost children of history who were led astray, you know, and some of it obviously is there, that there is a lot of like, you know, you've been led astray. But I think some of it also has to do, because Sir's methodology is so deeply oriented into political economy, I think politically economy wise, there is something to be looked at these sort of debates, like also the reluctance, and the hint is there, the reluctance of going into English education. The reluctance of going into kind of, you know, so many Shudra parties have political power at the state level now for decades. They are important players. Look at the educational or intellectual apparatus they have created. It's very deliberately vacant, because that's not an area of priority. That is not the result of Brahmins misleading them. It is also a result of, this is not my priority, my power comes from elsewhere. It is also realpolitik in some form of the other. And I think if we have to create, and I'll wrap up with this, I think it was Kanshiram Sahib who said that, like, you know, he had a very simple heuristic, very simple formula that The community which suffers the most has the most desire for social change. By that yardstick, if you look at the scheduled castes, at the hierarchy of they have the most radical impetus to kind of reject the system totally. So when you look at the caste entire superstructure that has been set up, you have the Brahminical idea of what this Dwij idea of what nationhood or society can be, and then you have the counter imagination which is coming from Baba Sahib and many others, and of course he is also doing that same project by going to Buddha. Buddha gives the scheduled caste or the Buddhists claim to 2,500 years of history, because then it's like, no, we are the longest running resistance movement. It's been going on for 2,500 years, and it adds many dimensions to it. So you go to Maharashtra, all these Buddha vihars in Vidarbha. I lived there for a year. I was lucky enough to be in that space. You see Samrat Ashok also there. You see obviously Buddha also there, because all of that iconography is then claimed. So I understand the scope of that project, but if along with the idea of the Brahminism and the Buddhist or the Ambedkarite idea, if you're trying to create a sort of a third claim on imagination, on social imagination, and we are putting it under Shudra and like wrapping it with the idea of material production rooted in some form of agriculturism, then we also have to then talk about the graded inequality of violence, because you do benefit from labor that you're not paying for, that you're appropriating. So it is very much rooted into that production also. So anyways, that's one contentious, takes nothing away from the fact that it is a tremendous book. I think there's a quote, there's a section where he mentions the story when he met Partha Chatterjee, the great, I won't say great, but the Brahmin scholar Partha Chatterjee, and he immediately asked him, "You're working on Buddha, do you know Sanskrit?" And it's fascinating that, like, I think Manikanta also mentioned Spivak, like at their stage of the career in 2024. Professor Kancha is still putting out books which is provocating, which is kind of stirring, which is kind of adding new dimensions and has scope, which I think is a triumph that Brahmin scholars at their level are not doing. And in that sense, and I will wrap, this was the last point, because Manikanta said something like, imagine if this book had been published by Oxford. I say reject Oxford. Dump it in a bin. I don't care about it. I actually truly have started figuring out that this is not our praxis at all. So rebellion, the Shudra rebellion, is not necessarily a plea to include us in that thing. It begins with rejection. We'll do our own thing. You are not invited in that. By that yardstick, I'll wrap up. I think I've taken enough time. Yeah, all right. Thank you, everybody. Jai Bhim. I'll wrap up.